slow clap it up for me, like I know you do. That's what I'm talking about, right? That's it. My friends, as good as you've done all day and all event, would you please welcome Mr. Ashton Shanks?
Need that song to hit. I love that song because it reminds you of the different levels you go through, right? In life, which today we're talking about levels and devils. I love this because there's always those specific moments, right? That you're like, oh, I feel a different level, right? Right? Yeah. Like that time you hit 10K a month. Feels good. Feels like a different level instantly, right? Well, the first 10 hires. Different level. What about your first fire? Different level. First negative month. Levels, we all go through them. How many of you feel like you hit a new level this last year? Yeah. New level. Amazing. What about a new devil? Yeah. They keep coming. I'm excited because, really over the last year, there's two big lessons that I'm going to be talking about today. They're really, really important. I spent a lot of time this last year reflecting, thinking, trying to figure out what I need to become, right? Because as you grow, you've got to grow too. It can't just be your business. So there's two really, really valuable lessons I want to talk about. This first one is essentially around capacity. I've spent a lot of time thinking about capacity. And ultimately, the first lesson is that your capacity will determine the quantity of destinations that you get to choose from. Right? One of the biggest keys that any investor wants, business owner wants, is optionality. That's one of your biggest things you look for. The ability to choose. The ability to choose between different options. So your capacity will determine that, but there is a difference between capacity and capability. Right? Capacity is what you can actively do now. Capability is what there's potential for. Take an example. Plastic cup, very thin. It has a certain amount of capacity of water it can hold. It cannot change the capacity. The capability is different though. Because if I heat up that plastic, I start stretching it, that same plastic cup now has a bigger capacity. Right? So many of you have a lot of capability, but right now your capacity is limited. Right? So the biggest thing here is how do we actually expand capacity to allow for more options? Because your capacity at this moment is what is indicating or telling you this is what you can do. These are the options that you actually have. There are nothing else that you can do. So that's what we're going to be kind of talking about today in the first lesson, and then I'll get to the second one later. So let's establish first as founders. I love doing these events because this is my people, right? Like you guys can go to other entrepreneur events, right? But like agency life is different. It's very, very different. So to be in a room where everyone else I know is kind of going through similar stuff, we've all kind of like had the same client fires, same problems happening, we get to be a lot more vulnerable in this room. And so I'm going to bring that on my part. What I request on your end is feedback. I've been told I sound like a pastor. So if you've ever been to church, feel free to shout out an amen. That's good. Well, exactly. It gives me energy. It keeps me going. But it's going to be a good talk today. I'm really excited. So at the surface level, what is our job as CEOs, as founders? First is to establish a product offering that the market deems valuable. Step number one. Second thing is to run operations that deliver valuable products as efficiently as possible. Fair enough. And then deploy the cash generated by those operations. At its core basis, that's all we do as founders. But there is a below the surface level. Right? Below the surface level, we have to create and protect vision to team. I often say that agencies are not really marketing companies, we're more HR companies. That's what we do. We manage people, we manage talent. And the talent happens to do marketing, right? So that's the first thing we do. The second thing we do, though, is curate and protect market value. We have to constantly innovate. We have to constantly change because the market is always moving. So our job as a founder is to make sure we're not only curating the value, we're protecting it, right? Next, increase the capacity of the organization. Our job as the founder is to make sure our capacity constantly changes, evolves, and expands. The only way we do that, though, is to increase the capacity of ourselves first, and then those around us. Hard lesson, we often talk about hiring from experience, right? It's the way to go. But I want us to take a step back as founders, because this is an entirely leadership-based talk. I want us to realize that the only reason that we have to hire for experience is because we lack the capacity to change the capacity of those around us. We don't know how to expand their skill set fast enough, or we don't know how to teach them what we need. Therefore, we go find people who already have it. It's not about whether that's right or wrong, but at its root cause, we lack the ability to train and get what we need from others, so we have to find those that already have it because we don't have the capacity to do it for them. So we have to learn how to exchange and increase capacity across the board. So, if that's the case, if that's our role, what are the first things that must be true in order to increase capacity? I'm a big reverse engineer guy, so almost every, like a lot of you have already talked, like we're like, how do you do this, how do you do that? For a lot of you, it was reverse engineering process. Start with what you want, reverse engineer backwards. So, with that in mind, if we want to increase capacity, what are the things that must be true in order for that to be true? Well, there's 3 pillars. The first one is trust. Trust. Firstly, with yourself, and then your environment. For a lot of us, really the breakdown is somewhere inside of trust. Me included, I had to take a hard look of going, where am I breaking my promises to myself? Where do I no longer trust myself? Because if you want to increase capacity, you have to be in a state of trust. So it starts with you, and then it goes to environment. This is people, this is place, this is things. So do we trust the people around us? Do we trust our leadership team? Do we trust our friends? Do we trust our spouses? Do we trust our teams or our clients? If you do not have that trust, you will limit your progress. It's also with place, where you find yourself on a daily basis, the places that you go, the office that you work at. Some of you, I've had this conversation before, where you really, really want to grow, but you feel like, man, I just can't get creative, I can't think. And when we're on Zoom, you're like working out of a closet. It's hard to develop trust there or to feel safe or confident there, right? So all of these metrics are very important for us to think about of, do I feel safe? Do I have trust in these areas? The next is commitment. Commitment. You actually have to be committed to your vision. You can't have commitment if you don't clearly know what your vision actually is to begin with. And it can't just be some revenue number. You have to know what you actually want. I was talking to someone last night, and it was like, I really want to achieve this revenue level. Why? Well, I want to buy a house for the family. The dude is netting 80 grand a month. You can buy a house with 80 grand a month in profit. So really understanding why is it that you actually want to achieve that destination. That's the only way you can actually develop commitment around it, is if it's so clear and you know you want this thing, that's how you can actually develop commitment. But if it lacks clarity, then it's really hard to get there, right? And then next to your standards. Commitment to your standards. What do you say that you will do? What do you say as a person, as a company? What are you committing towards? You have to be committed to your standards if you want to increase capacity. Next thing is clarity and soundness. Clarity, a lot of you probably know what that means. Soundness is the very same thing. Soundness of communication, soundness of thought. We have to be very careful in the world that we live in today because we are bombarded with messaging, triggers, things that want our attention. We're constantly getting dopamine fires. And so the ability to think clearly and soundly is a lost art or a losing art. As founders, we must fight to maintain soundness of thought. Because in a war, I love studying history and wars, but in a war, how does it feel if your general is all over the place? Some of you are going from fire to fire to fire, doing a million tasks but not actually getting anything productive done. How can your team rally around you if it feels like you're running around with your head cut off? In a war, I want to know that my leader is confident, clear, ready to make decisions, and is steps ahead of me. But some of you are too far into the trenches to where your team feels like you're just a soldier. You're not supposed to be a soldier. You're a general on the mountaintop telling them what to do. So soundness of thinking in mind is very important. And then clarity on outcomes, good and bad. We must understand what risks we face on a day-to-day basis. We must know worst possible situations and outcomes so that we can plan accordingly, right? In the Spartan times, they had these halls that they would put the Spartan soldiers in. It's called like the halls of death, essentially. It was a place where death was everywhere. And they would put these Spartan soldiers in there from the book of rehearsing death because they needed their Spartans to become desensitized to it. So that when moments came of high chaos or high risk or high danger, they wouldn't have fear because they're constantly around it anyway. We don't have to go to a hall of death, but we do need to be preparing for any outcome, positive or negative. Because some of you, a good thing will happen and you blow it up far too large. You make it a bigger deal than it is. And that will throw you off focus. Some of you, when a negative thing happens, it throws you way too far off because you weren't anticipating it. You didn't pre-plan it. And so your emotions instantly flare up, and this is causing a lack of focus, right? So these things are the three pillars that are required first in order to increase capacity. So at the core of any dysfunctional team, person or company, the bottleneck or the bedrock of it is somewhere in broken trust. So anytime something comes up and I'm needing to solve a problem, the first question is, where did my trust get broken? In a team, somewhere along the lines, trust is broken. This is why your team is afraid to complain or bring up a problem they see, because they don't trust how you're going to react. They don't trust the intentions. A team that fights on a call, respectfully, professionally, is a very, very good thing. That's the sign of a healthy team. I encourage you to read the 5 dysfunctions of a team, but ultimately, the base layer of this, trust is broken somewhere. For me, if I'm feeling chaotic, I need to start asking myself, where have I lost trust with myself? Am I working on stuff that I shouldn't be? Am I less productive? Am I sticking to my disciplines that I ultimately committed to? Somewhere along the lines, my trust has been broken with myself, and it's causing these like fragments of performance, right? Trust kills progress. Lack of commitment kills trust. Lack of clarity kills commitment, which then kills trust. So it's the bedrock of it. You need to grade yourself on different areas, professional, as a human, as a leader, as a business owner. How are we doing in my areas of trust? Do I trust our processes? Do I trust our team? Do I trust myself? Do I know what I need to do? Which, shout out to you guys, this is why many of you are here. You know that there is insight in education that you do not yet have, and so you are willing to invest to go find it. It's a very good start, but we also have to train our teams to do this as well.
If you're an agency owner operating in the world of digital marketing and you serve clients and you want to grow your business, then pay attention because the #1 agency owner event is happening in January 2025 in Nashville, Tennessee.
And this is the stuff that they don't really talk about. It's not just sales and marketing. It's operations, it's team building, it's mergers, it's acquisitions, it's all the stuff that you need to get to that $1 million a month run rate.
I and my business partner, Eddie Malouf, came together to build the best event of the year for people like you. We wanted an event that didn't just talk about how to get more calls on your calendar or DM strategies, but how do you build an advanced organization, not just a 6-figure agency, but what does it take to actually build an 8-figure agency? And so we've got together to bring in the best speakers, the best agency owners to share unprecedented and unparalleled value to people like you. This has quickly become the #1 event of the year for agency owners anywhere. And last year, we've sold out the event 45 days before our event even started. And typically, we sell out on VIP tickets 3 months before the event starts. So if you're serious about growing your business, not just to 6 or 7 figures, but 8 figures, and you want to learn from the best, this event is for you. If you want to learn more, go to theagencyfounders.com or go to the link in the description. I hope to see you there.
So, lesson number 2. Your destination
if you remember the first one, is our capacity will determine how many options that we have. But our destination, where we actually end up, will be dictated how we handle hard conversations in hard situations. So, how do we actually navigate hard conversations first? Then I'll move to situations. So, ground rules for this. Conversations are a very interesting one. This is a part of our job. We have to talk to people all day long, whether it's clients, staff, partners, doesn't matter. But conversations are a big part of our work. Communication is really key. So there's some ground rules to having hard conversations I want us to have, and then I'm going to go into some examples. So first, perspective and perception rule, right? The key here to know is that we are not the person on the other side of the table, right? Everyone will have their own worldview, life experiences for the reason they are showing up the way they show up. It's how they're going to view the engagement. And so as leaders, as the ones who want to step forward and lead our teams well, lead ourselves well, we have to understand that perspective and perception rule. It does not matter what the objective truth is. My goal as a leader when I'm talking to someone is to truly understand first their perception and their perspective that they have. Whether it's right or wrong, I must understand how they view this conversation and situation so that I can handle it correctly, right? It's not combative. I want to know how they think so that I can possibly understand how to navigate the waters better, right? So the key is to know what the base of the conversation is, what is their perspective, how are they approaching this conversation. The second thing is you must have a target, all right? Matthew McConaughey says that the arrow doesn't seek the target draws the arrow. If you go into a conversation and you don't clearly understand or know where you want it to end up, then a lot of times that's where you get into like these weird arguments are drawn out, or you like 20 minutes later you realize you're not even talking about the original thing that you started the conversation for anyway. So you have to understand like where do we actually want this conversation to end so that you can reverse engineer backwards, right? Next, frame is everything. The frame is everything. So how the conversation is positioned in the beginning will guide the rest of the conversation. All right, so ensuring that the proper frame is established and maintained is a key for a win-win outcome. As leaders, founders, your goal should always be a win-win. It should never be a lose, win, win, lose, 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 right? It should always be a win-win. And so you have to make sure when you're framing the conversations, you start off that way. And we'll talk more about this in a second. So I'm going to give a few examples of different things that like employees will say. I've polled agency owners and like, okay, what are some of the hard conversations that you guys have? So what follows, I want to make sure that we're very clear. What follows is not inherently bad. So the conversations or requests that people have is not inherently bad. It is just, and oftentimes actually really, really good. It's really, really good sometimes when you have hard conversations. And so, example, we're going to talk about someone asking for a raise. That's not a bad thing. It's actually a good thing. But if you're not careful, you can frame the conversation, or they will frame the conversation in a way that seems negative. So these tips I give you is not to win the argument, not to win the conversation. The keys I'm giving to you is to try to help you as a leader navigate them more correctly so that your team feels valued, respected, and the company gets what it needs. Because at the end of the day, that's the only thing that matters. Does the company get what it needs, right? Cool, all right, let's dive in. As we talk about these specific situations, there's a few biases and frames to be aware of, okay? My background in high school, I was like debate nerd, right? Like that's what I did. I didn't play sports, I was in debate, right? So I became very, very good at arguments, at structuring conversations, right? And so these are some of the biases and frames that you have to be careful of and just be aware of. First one is the black and white fallacy. This is the us versus them framing, right? Anytime there's a conversation where a staff member has a request or wants to talk about something important, this is oftentimes what I see more than anything, where it starts to feel like employee versus boss, right? So the first thing is like understanding that this fallacy normally comes in because it's fear. People are afraid to come to have these conversations. They're hard, right? And so understanding first that when people start to do biases or it feels argumentative, it most of the time is not congruent to what they actually feel about you. There's fear, and when people are not trained, then they can react emotionally, right? And so it's very important to just know that this is oftentimes like something you'll see when they start to have the conversation. It starts to feel like it's you versus them. They give you a point, you rebuttal it, and then they give you another one. You've got to try to like step away from the argumentative side, right? So here's the solution. When you start to see or feel this like us versus them, The first thing is to know of a thing called in-group favoritism and out-group bias. Essentially, this is for humans who, even the smallest, most subtle things, they will either have resistance to you or they will have closeness to you. So people oftentimes, like there was a psychological study where people just gathered everyone in a room, and they made everyone flip heads or tails on a coin, right? And then heads over here, tails over here. That's the only thing. It was pure luck, right? You flipped a coin. Then they let them go out. They had socials. And what they started watching and tracking was the people who started flipping tails just naturally throughout the day would gravitate towards each other. Just because they had that one small thing that connected them, right? So even on you guys, when I start to have resistance or I can feel resistance, my first thing is how can I create similarities together? This is oftentimes why in the beginning of a conversation, it's great to find commonalities. Do they have kids? Do they have a spouse? Do they have tattoos? Do they work out? Ask them something like that in the very beginning because it immediately will start to create that idea of like, we're not on different sides. Even subconsciously, and this will help the conversation because now your approach or you're entering into a hard conversation with, we have similarities. And psychologically, they will bond closer to that. Even things like your company brand, realizing that people oftentimes attach their identity or their self-esteem to group membership. They're part of your company. You automatically have group membership. So even talking a little bit about what we're working on, starting off the day of like, man, I love getting to wake up and come to like see everyone in Slack. I saw this message in Wins. Did you see that message in Wins? Cool, cool, cool. You're starting off the conversation reminding them that we're a part of a similar group. It's not us versus them, right? The second thing is to preset and pre-frame expectations and show that your effort is to come out with a great outcome. Remind them that you want the best for them. So sometimes in a conversation example, we'll talk about it, but it's like, reminding them that this is the purpose of this call. I'm really excited to have this call. I'm really excited to see what we're gonna get from it because I think both of us are gonna leave this thing really happy and excited. Starting off the call, letting them know that my goal is not to turn this away or end the meeting fast or for me to like reject your proposal. The goal is for us to leave happy and excited. And I'm really excited to have it because if I have happy employees, we have a happy company. And that means we do well. So the whole goal is to show that, hey, we have the same goal, same outcome, and if it can make sense, then ideally we get a win-win here. So next one is straw man arguments. Straw man arguments. So this one, if you've ever dated or have kids, you've heard this argument all the time. So straw man is essentially when someone has an informal fallacy that refutes your argument and almost changes its direction entirely. Some people confuse this with gaslighting. It's not really the same thing. But essentially, like example, if I have a kid, which my youngest son's Roman, he's 5 now, so hasn't really talked back yet, but give me 5 years, I'll come back and talk about it. But example, time for bed, right? 8:30, time to go to bed, right? He knows it's coming up, it's time to read books, time to shower, it's time to go to bed. And if he's like, all of a sudden I'm like, Roman, we're done, we need to go take a shower, blah, blah, blah. And he goes, you're always too strict and you never let me do anything. That is a straw man argument. It's not the conversation we're actually having. You're pulling another argument to try to cover over this one to make it bigger, right? You're just changing, you're pivoting. In hard conversations, it'll be very easy for people to want to do this because this is very easy. It oftentimes comes from their lack of defense, lack of ability to actually give reasonable excuses or rebuttals to what you're trying to say, or they're just highly emotional, which normally means you set the frame wrong in the beginning of the call or you had no frame to begin with. So, solution to straw man arguments. First, do not let this trap work. As leaders, we must be very, very good at controlling our emotions. We must be objective. We must have empathy. But it is easy when people do straw man arguments to lose your cool. Because oftentimes straw man arguments lead to emotional or integrity type challenges where someone will challenge something that actually means a lot to you and it upsets you. But as leaders, we must control our mind. We must control our emotions, right? So don't fall for this. But if these things come up, there's often breadcrumbs to what they actually mean or what they actually feel. Look for the breadcrumbs. Try to see context and why they just said that, and that'll allow you to progress a little bit further. Next, reset the scene and reset the frame of the conversation, right? Do not be afraid to correct and say we're getting off topic. In this moment, we're going to talk about this. This is why we are here. This is also why it's really important to set agendas in your meetings. In the beginning, you can set that frame. And so just pull them back on the cart. Don't try to handle that argument there. Stay focused and allow them to express it, but make sure they're staying on topic. Okay? The frame. The frame is super important. I've said already, like, the frame is extremely important if you want to do well, namely because it sets the foundation for the entire conversation, right? So, if you want to know what a frame is, here's the most simplest way to make sure you have a good frame. If you think of a stool, right? Very simple. I'm a terrible drawer, but I feel like a three-legged stool shouldn't be that hard. Cool. You got 3 legs. Jellyfish that maybe is an amputee. So, the whole thing of a 3-legged stool, right? If you lose one of the legs, it falls over. Easy enough. The first leg, though, is what? Right? It's what you say. So in the very beginning of a conversation, it's very important that you're choosing your words carefully. Why are we here today? Starting off the call, build a little bit of that rapport, get them on the same group side, but it's what you're saying. The second leg, though, and this is where most of us, including myself, fail, it's how you say it. Okay? How you say it. Be very careful of your tonality. Be very careful of your cadence. Be very careful and wary of how you're positioning things and how clearly and succinctly you're communicating. If it helps, smile. It'll naturally change the voice inflection that you have. It will come across more positive. Even if it's a hard conversation, smile. Before you get on the call, if I'm gonna have a really hard conversation, what I'll do, like 2 minutes before the call, I'll just sit there and smile. To myself, it's kind of weird. But I want my brain to get into that activity because as soon as they get on the call, the energy will be felt by them. So you want to be on the call, like instantly, you can almost probably feel it's like, hey, how are you? I'm actually super excited for this call. I actually really think this is important. And so, over the next 20 minutes, I think it's really important that we discuss X, Y, Z. And ideally, what my intention is that we can leave this call blank, 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 with this plan blank. Does that sound great? Awesome. The next thing, and I'll tell later, but it's important now. The next thing, though, I like to give control of the call to them. They requested the meeting. Let them have control. This is your meeting? I'll listen. Where do you want to start? Allow them to explain themselves. But I've allowed to create the frame, the context, the bowling alley that they can now work within, but now make them feel empowered. Now it's your conversation. I'm here to listen and support and help problem solve. If you can do that, they'll instantly feel that, but they'll be working within your lanes. Final leg. Relevance. Relevance. How relevant is the conversation to them? How relevant is the frame to them? Is it some template or is it something unique? Can you say their name in it? Can you talk about a specific situation? The relevance is very important inside of the frame because now it feels custom. Now it feels like we're actually having a dialogue and a relationship. So it's not just what you say, it's how you say it, and is it relevant to them? All these are very important when you're deciding the frame of a conversation. If you're in sales, you already know what a frame is and a pre-frame is, right? You're trying to create the context in their mind, right? So these are really, really important. So that's the frame. Let's talk about I want a raise. I want to be promoted. The first thing to understand that when someone asks for a raise or someone is asking for a promotion, they're trying to increase their attachment to you. This is a good thing. So when someone's talking about a raise, you shouldn't immediately be like, oh, I don't like this, right? Even if you feel like they're a bad employee or they're only money-minded, them asking for a raise is asking for a greater level of commitment to you. So approach it as a positive thing. If we can all win here, then it's great. So that's the core thing, right? The second, though, is I prefer that these meetings never be spontaneous. Don't let these meetings happen on a random call. If the topic is brought up, schedule a separate call for this. The reason I like this is, one, you don't know what they've prepared, and you're not prepared yet either. You probably will not have a clear mind going into the conversation. But the second thing is, I want to go away, and I actually want to prepare for that call. I want to problem solve behind the scenes and see if I can find a solution that will allow them to be happy, and it's a win-win. So I need time to do that. I got to get with the CFOs. I got to look at the P&Ls. We got to see what we're trying to grow in the next 6 months and see if we can afford it. But the second thing is it gives them a chance to prepare, and I want to see if they actually do it. I want to see if they actually have reasons backing up why they want what they want on my next call, because now we've both had chances to prepare. If they show up with nothing, kind of an indicator, right? So never have it spontaneously. The next thing is like to pre-frame the call to set the foundation, then pass authority, like I said, I told you earlier. Cool. After the foundations of the frame is set, I like to listen intently. It's very important. Take notes on these calls. Show them that you care about this conversation. Show them that it actually matters to you. It is not just a random call you booked on your calendar to make them happy. Take notes. Listen intently. And are the things that they're saying have merit in data, or is it on emotion? Right? Listen intently. Next, listen to understand. Don't be afraid to ask questions to better understand. Seek to understand fully. If you do not understand fully, keep asking questions, but be very careful. Do not ask questions that show opposition. Again, we're on the same side, I just need to understand. So make sure you're not asking any questions that could come off feeling like you're already rebuttaling them. Cool? Then, don't beat around the bush, and don't make false promises just to try to make someone happy. You have to make sure that you're being truthful, and you're being clear, and you're not beating around the bush. Right? Which also means you should have data and reasons why you can approve or deny this. Right? So if you have a reason for saying no, it should be logical and it should be backed up. A players are adults. Treat them like it. Right? A players can also tell if you're just trying to push this off. Right? So be very clear, be logical, and again, your goal should be a win-win all around. If it helps the company and it's good for them, it's good for everyone. And, look for paths to create win-win outcomes. Cool. All right. I want to raise checklists. These are some things that I think are really important as founders that you would want to look into, that research period. These are the things that I would want to see. One, how does their request align with market rates? All right. At the end of the day, I think people should pay their teams very, very well. I personally think paying people above market average is the right way to go. It gets better talent, better loyalty, and personally, I like it better anyway as a founder. But you should not be grossly overpaying. Right? Should not be having people where you look at the market rate and it's half of what you're paying someone. Not only is it bad for company scale and growth, it's easier when you're small, but when you get bigger, very difficult. Also, when you go to sell, something that they're going to look at is why are these people getting paid what they get paid, right? So how does it align with market rates? And when you're looking at market rates, it can't just be gross across the board. Some people just do a Google search of one job position and they go, that's the market rate. It's not the market rate. Look at industry, look at years of experience, look at region of where they live, right? Someone living in New York City, Manhattan, it's a lot different than in the middle of nowhere, Iowa, right? So you have to make sure that your market rates that you're looking at are accurate to your company. Next, how does their request align with the company P&L? Can you afford it while achieving other targets? Remember, if you're smaller right now, remember as you grow, your expenses grow as well, right? If you don't have an admin teams are expensive. Right now, you're not basing your decision-making on it because everyone in your company produces money. But eventually, you'll have teams that are not producers, and that will require extra capital. So just make sure it aligns with your company P&L. Next, can you quantify the request with tangible value being added back to the company? Is the increase that you're going to put more money back into the company? Right? You got to make sure that you're not just giving it because they're really nice or they were with you when you got started. You have to have logical reasons for why you're doing something. And most of the time for me, it has to be measured. How do we measure this? Especially when it comes to bonus compensation, right? And make sure that that person actually has control of the outcome that you're bonusing someone on, right? So I've seen a lot, it's like where an operations person is getting bonused on revenue for the company. It doesn't make sense. They don't control that, right? Cool. Next, does the timing of the request make sense? This is a hidden one. Does the timing of the request actually make sense? Why do you think they're asking for it right now? Okay? Sometimes there's hidden clues underneath that. Next, I want a promotion checklist. Do they clearly understand the position they're requesting? Right? Do they clearly understand that a CMO is not a media buyer who's really good? Do they understand the work required? Do they understand the work requested? It's very different. And as they get promoted, the requirements or skills needed at that position are oftentimes very different than the level that they're currently at. So have they demonstrated, and do they clearly know the skills that are required at that level, right? Next, does the timing of the request make sense? What caused the request? Is it reliable? Did they just have a good month, and now all of a sudden they want to be promoted? You got to make sure that the timing of it actually makes sense. How can you battle test them in the role before titles are given and before compensation changes? This is, I think, one of the unique values from promoting within, is that you can test them in the role before you change anything. Someone else, if you hire externally, they're coming in, you're paying them, they're signing contracts, they're in the role, and you see if they're good or not. If they work within your company, you have a great opportunity to put them to the test before they actually get the position. If they're an A player, they should have no problem with that. Right? So can you give them a battle test? If they're a director, C-suite level, it's strategic. It's long-term thinking. Great. I want you to create a doc that shows us all the current weaknesses inside of that department that you've observed, and I want you to create 30, 60, 90-day targets, KPIs, for what we should do to achieve that target. I want that plan to me. This will be their first test to see if they can actually do the position. Right? So find ways of how can we test this thought and theory before it happens. And realistically, if they are a good fit, it's incredible for your company because it's so much nicer having someone in a position that's in promotion that knows your company already, that knows how you guys operate, that knows the culture. It's a great thing, but you will kill teams if you promote the wrong person. You'll kill them. So you have to make sure you protect it and hedge. Okay? Then allow them to help come up with the plan. If you don't know how you can test this behavior, this idea, ask them. Man, this is incredible. Honestly, you've worked really, really hard. I think you might be incredible for that position. To be totally fair, I don't even know how we could test this thought. What do you think? Ask them. See what they think. How do they think that they could prove and demonstrate that they should be in that role and allow them to be a part of that journey too, right? And if nothing else, here's what happens. If they aren't qualified, they do a bad job, it will be very clear to them. They'll do it and be like, yikes. Yeah, maybe not great. But then you can actually come up with another plan of great, well, you clearly really want this role. How can we create a plan for over the next 6 to 12 months? We can get you trained up into that position. Right now, obviously there's a little gap, but that's okay because you're still here and we still love you. Allow them to participate inside of that. Make sense? Cool. Now watch out for the Dunning-Kruger effect. How many of you have ever had imposter syndrome? Okay, well, a few of you. So the Dunning-Kruger effect essentially shows the idea of imposter syndrome and how ego flares and dips, right? So here's the concept. Let's take this graph, right? Let's say this right here is 0 experience. Anytime that you're starting to learn something, your learning and development of that concept, skill, trade, whatever, has exponential increase, right? Going from 0 to 2 is a massive amount of learning at one time. This line will reflect essentially your confidence. So in the beginning of the Dunning-Kruger effect, what happens is your confidence skyrockets. Then it hits here, then it dips, and it plateaus. Essentially, this is when you're inexperienced entirely. And so a lot of you, if you're hiring younger, their confidence is really high, yeah? You guys see the entrepreneurs are making 10K a month and it's they're the billionaire status, right? It's because they're learning so much at one time, their confidence is at an all-time high. What happens though, is the more you learn, the more you realize how much you have to learn. And it dies. This is called the trough of disillusionment. This is when you start to actually develop really good skill, but you also now start to understand how much more you have to learn. And then you start to get perspective and it'll even out. A lot of the people, when they're looking for a raise or promotion, they're here. So they're learning a ton and they feel that they have developed a ton as a human. Therefore, raise, therefore, promotion. Because they're night and day different than they were a year ago. So you have to be careful. Now on the flip side, when you promote someone who's actually really, really good, and they move into that role, and they start to take on more responsibility, and they start to see all that's actually required for them to do well, you can see their confidence dip entirely. You as a leader will have to determine, is it because they're in the trough of disillusionment, or is it because they're not capable of doing the role? There are people that you will promote that are totally capable, but their confidence has killed their performance just because of the new role. And so you will have to decipher, is this person actually capable? Do they have the capacity to actually do it? And if so, I need to help coach them through this. Sometimes, legit, the hack is just writing this chart and explaining it to them. Sometimes that's all they need to know, right? So you'll have to be able to determine that to make sure you're making good decisions, but also you're doing the right thing for your employee. Right? Cool. Hard situations. You guys ready? It's thick, right? It's good though? All right, cool. Want situations? Give me situations. Say situations. Situations. Cool. Let's watch this video.
Pretty crazy week. Really crazy week.
Nice.
It's 11 p.m. Pacific time in 2021. It is August 15th. Tomorrow is the launch of Human X, and I am tired. I am really tired. I'm kind of just recording this for myself in the future because I think maybe someday it'll be cool to look back on. But man, right now, we're staying in Seattle like we always do, but the house is so noisy. And tomorrow, the launch call for Human X is at like 7 a.m. Pacific time. So I got a hotel so I can have some quiet and I can focus on this launch because I want it to go well. But man, this past week has been tough. A lot of fires. My COO and his family are out recovering from COVID, which I'm really hoping the best for them. But with that said, he's been out all week, and I really needed him this week. One, to record trainings for Human X. There were several trainings that I just had to pick up. And then on two, I needed someone watching Human Media, the agency, while I could focus on Human X, but he wasn't there. And it was a tough week. I had to rebuild 3 accounts, do an audit, prospect, run some ads, and build all the trainings for Human X. And so I'm really tired right now. I've had very little sleep. I can't help but yawn throughout the days right now. I'm almost kind of delirious. But I also haven't got to go to the gym, which I'm really pissed about. Really pissed. I'm pissed. But with that said, that's entrepreneurship. So hopefully someday this is all worth it. And I hope we get to help a lot of people. I really don't want all of this work to go to nothing without helping people. I'm really excited for what I think I can do. Billionaire status is no joke. And I don't want to just be one of those people that just say that and not actually do it. I think I can do it. I think I'm designed to do it. I'm supposed to do it. There's a lot of people counting on me to do it. It's really hard though sometimes. I'm literally waiting right now. I should be in bed, but I'm waiting because I ordered Uber Eats. Again, breaking diet. I should not have done that. My personal trainer would kill me. But I'm so hungry and depleted. But I should be going to bed. I'm just hungry. And I think part of me wants to punish myself. That's deep. Anyway, I hope that someday I look back and I laugh at stuff like this, but right now it's tough. But I know that if I keep pushing and just keep hustling, keep trying, keep working hard, and keep trying to be a good leader, then it'll pay off and I'll be able to help people, rescue people out of human trafficking, and provide the life for my family that they deserve. And I think part of it's the life to me that I think I deserve. Pretty crazy, right? Anyway. It's 11:05. If I go to bed by midnight, I can get up by 6, probably 5:45. 5.5 hours, pretty good. I don't know why I'm recording this. All right, I'm going to bed.
So obviously, it's kind of cool that to have the video. I do it every now and then to myself, and hopefully you guys do it too, because I think it's really important. It's really cool to look back and like see yourself, right? Like in that video too, I'm like looking at it. It was a launch of Human X, which is just a course, and I look at that and I was like, compared to what I've gone through in the last year, it's like nothing. It's a joke. But I know that video, I'm not alone in those experiences. How many of you have been like I'm really tired. Yeah. Have you been like, man, I really hope this work just doesn't go for nothing? Been there, right? That experience isn't unique. It's new levels, new devils. And then the last year, that was back in 2021, and this last year, very interesting. In the beginning of the year, so I started at a company as an intern called Traffic and Funnels, and I just kind of worked my way up there, and then I went and started my company. And in June of 2022, I had the opportunity to come and actually acquire the company and take it over as CEO. Really cool story, right? I was like, oh man, intern to CEO, that's so cool. And then I moved into being a CEO of 4 companies, right? I got Sales Mentor, Traffic and Funnels, Heman X, Heman Media, right? 150 staff members overnight, like, oh my goodness, this is crazy. New levels crazy. Getting to see the amount of revenues coming in, right? Heman was doing well, but then all of a sudden it's like, oh man, doing 1.5 million a month. I got all this staff, got 2 offices, this is crazy. Actually 3 offices, nuts, new levels. Really, really cool, hard work. Then I started at the same time, I got my first international trip to speak at an event. It was the largest event I ever got to speak at, on stage for like 5,000 people at Affiliate World in Barcelona. Shout out to Nick Shackford through an amazing event at Barcelona at the same time. Super cool, man. I'm just like, oh, holy cats. Like things are growing, levels. Super cool. Now, Traffic and Funnels and the Sales Mentor acquisition, I knew it was gonna be hard, right? Like I got it for a steal, no cash out of pocket, like because it was a struggling company. And I saw all the things that they were needing, and I calculated like, okay, if this goes down though, I get the assets of them, I get an over 1 million sized email list, over 600,000 followers on their social media pages, all their assets, all their back content, like massive win. So even if I can't save the company, I still win. So I did it. And I didn't calculate some of the other issues that would come up, and I didn't calculate the stress that would entail, right? So I take it over in June. By September, I text the founding members. I think we are in the end game here. We knew that the problems were happening. Cash flow was depleting every month. Their bills and expenses were extremely, extremely high, over $800,000 a month in costs. Very hard to navigate that, especially when the business is barely producing 300 grand. You can see here, this is on the 15th of the month. The business had only produced $80,000. Oof, definitely in the end game. That picture on the left there was me after I pulled a 78-hour workday in the office. Didn't eat, didn't sleep. I worked, trying to find a way to save this business. Some say new devils. New devils. So I shut the companies down. Essentially, Heman wrapped the assets into our company, shut the business down. Very, very difficult. Had to let go of a lot of really great people. Had to start winding down operations. This was in September, but November, I got a CID from the FTC on my desk about some stuff that the company had done 2-3 years prior. We didn't really have concern. I owned Evans & Welch for 4 months. I was CEO. I took no salaries. I took no distributions. But now I know the FTC is coming after me because I'm CEO of the company. So I spend the next 1.5 years working with the FTC to try to come to a reasonable situation. I didn't think I should be on it. They disagreed. Finally wrapped that up a few months ago. But here's the thing, very hard situation. Was not expecting it. So I calculated all the risks essentially on paper if the businesses didn't work, but there are liabilities to companies you acquire that you may not be thinking of, and it's not just taxes and loans. So you've got to be very, very careful. You got to calculate the risks, right? So how do you actually navigate it all? Very tough, because meanwhile I'm dealing with all that, I still have my companies. We're still needing to grow. We still are expanding pretty rapidly. So how do you navigate it all? 2 things, offensive and defensive leadership and creativity. So let's start with offensive leadership. Offensive leadership, essentially think of our role is the creation of various systems. This is what we do as business. Even if you're not an ops, as humans, what we do is we synthesize data, we create brain paths in our mind, and then we execute. That is a system, right? So what we do is we create various systems. You are a system, and what we try to do as founders is to create an organization, a company, that can act and do what our mind does. That's essentially what we're trying to do. We build processes, SOPs, we hire teams so that we can take the system that exists up here and now it can exist in the material world, right? So what we do as leaders is we create systems. Talent is a way to increase or expand the systems, essentially. We're trying to add parts to our machine. So a system essentially at the base root, right, it's a set of principles or procedures that we have to get something done. So systems create behaviors, behaviors create habits, and habits drive outcomes. We all create systems. You either have systems by intent or by default, but you have them. If you lack systems, context, SOPs, actual procedures, you still have a system. It's just chaos, and that is your system. So, if we can focus on creating better systems, we create better behaviors for ourselves, for our team, for our companies, and create behaviors, create habits, and then the habits is what actually drives outcomes, right? So, to grow as a company and as a leader, we must always be adapting our systems, right? It's impossible to have progress without change. So the key is, then how do we drive change as leaders, okay? 1, you first have to teach and train and change the way you and your team sees change, right? I've heard it here several times already. It's like, oh man, sometimes it's like visionaries, if you're a visionary, like always changing stuff all the time, right? It's a problem. It's a problem. You have to be careful. But realistically, to get where we want to go, we will obviously need what we don't currently have, which means we must have change. So as leaders, we have to be the proponents of driving the way people see change. Change is a good thing. Accurate, concise, smart change is a good thing. But you want your team to be excited about it. Easy way, pre-framing. Guys, we're in the marketing industry. Man, does it ever feel like every 3 months, like marketing changes? If you're a media buyer, does it ever feel like the algorithm changes every 3 months? Oh. So why do we think we wouldn't? Like our markets are always adapting, so we must also adapt. And this requires us to change. Second thing, we need to discern what actually needs to change. So if you're with a leadership team or you yourself, you can start asking yourself these questions of, 1, what is no longer working well that needs to be changed? What is no longer working well that just needs to be stopped? And if someone replaced me today, what is the first thing that they would have changed? These are all great questions. We were talking about constrained thinking earlier from Time to Think, Keith Cunningham, great book, top 5 favorite. Constrained thinking, these are great questions to ask yourself. What would they change? Gives yourself a different lens, right? Next, obsess about the why before the what. This is big. I would write this down. I would make this a tattoo. But people will go along with what, but they will give their lives for a why. Does your company have more sustenance than a what? Why do we do things? Your SOPs, your tasks that you have people do, they should know the why behind they do them. You'll get a much better result. Right? Don't just give them a task of do XYZ. Do XYZ because XYZ. Right? So making sure that people have a why, not even just this big holistic company brand building, but you want it into everything. But realistically, if you want to build a great company, you want team to kill themselves for you, there's got to be a why. It's got to be big. It's got to be good. Right? They'll give their lives for it. Next, be bold, because tweaks never changed anything. Never changed the world. Be bold with your decisions. A lot of times when I'm working with a team member, right, and we're just like resisting, you can feel there's resistance to growth and change and optimization. A lot of the question I'll be asking is like, okay, first, sometimes rather than trying to optimize the machine, you got to break it and build a new one. So making sure that if you need to change in a company, is your tweaks just trying to get it a little better? Are you making 1-2% changes when realistically you need 100% difference in outcome? Then probably you need a new machine. So be bold with them, right? Cool. Defensive leadership. I was offensive, now defensive. 3 Ds. 1, develop. Develop situational awareness. So time think, we've mentioned that already. But start developing that situational awareness for yourself, as a leader, as a professional, as a friend, as a human. Constantly be reviewing. I can't really say that enough. The more you can review and reflect and spend time thinking rather than just doing all the time, you will get dramatically better output from your brain. Spend much more time reviewing and developing situational awareness. Your team also needs to know that you have situational awareness. This is the whole idea of like, if my general is on the front line with me, I'm scared. because I need my general at the mountaintop, seeing if we're getting flanked, not fighting next to me, to where if he dies or he can't even see everyone else, how are we going to win, right? So, next, discern future threats and opportunities. Future threats and opportunities. There's two little mental models, very easy from game theory. So first is the Eisenhower matrix. If you're trying to come up with solutions or you're trying to get better grasp on like what should we be doing or really just getting clarity on a situation, the first one you can do is very simple, right? So in this, just create a box with 4 buckets. And the first thing that you can do really, if I'm trying to grade something, what we can do is high impact, it's kind of small probably, and then low impact. Cool. We went over here, high cost, low cost. Very simple. So if you're trying to establish or just get clarity, and you can change these boxes, but essentially you just want 2 different outcomes and you want them to be the opposites of each other. You can get your team together. Let's say we're trying to do marketing, we're trying to acquire more clients. It's going, okay guys, what are all the different ways that we can acquire clients? Let's just get them on a list. Start bulleting out, boom, 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 boom. Then essentially all you want to do is start delegating where they go actually in this box, right? So let's say ads. We want to run ads. And we're going to do this. Okay, ads, do we believe that that is high impact on the business? Yes, cool. Where is it on cost? Low cost or high cost? Probably high cost, right? So it's probably in this box. And it's like, okay, content, what about that? How much time does it take? Where's the impact? Blah, blah, blah. You start filtering these in, and you can start to see, okay, these are high cost, high impact, but these are all low cost, high impact initiatives. Where do you think you should start? Right there, right? Very simple. It's a super simple mental model, but it's very helpful to make things clear. It also helps your team to participate in your problem solving. The next one is knowns and unknowns, right? Same box, but this would be known, unknown, known, unknown. Oop. Unknown, known. You want to reverse them. And essentially what you start doing is if I'm starting to, like, let's say I'm acquiring a company, and I want to know more about it, or I want to know the risks that I'm not thinking about, I can start filtering in of what are the things I know about this company. I can see this, I can see that, I can see this. Cool. What do I know that I don't know about this company? Well, if I haven't gone further enough in, I might not have access to their QuickBooks, maybe I don't have their tax statements from the last couple of years, whatever. That would go in the known unknowns. Those are things I need to discover. The area that I'm starting to wonder, and the more you actually do that filtering process, you'll realize there are the unknown things that you don't know. Those are the ones that can kill you. So you want to start delegating out. So those are 2 very simple mental models that you can do to get clarity inside of your thinking. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? Cool. Finally, disrupt what is with what could be. This is creativity, and this is where I'm going into my final section. How am I doing on time? Oh, man, I'm good at this. Cool. Creativity. Creativity. Creativity is seeing what everyone else sees and thinking what no one else has thought, right? As a leader, one of our roles is going to be that creative. Now you might be like, I'm not creative. I'm not that guy. We are all creative. We are all creative. By the age of 3, we were speaking one of the hardest languages in the world. We are creative savants, but we like to dumb ourselves down because we can't draw or we can't do graphic design. We are all very, very creative. We all figured out how to use our fingers. We figured out how to open things. Like, we are extremely creative beings. So as a founder, you must steward the creativity because creativity is what allows you to move out of bad situations when everyone else thinks we lost. All of you are definitely creative because you're entrepreneurs. And entrepreneurs are wild. We're nuts. But you guys had the ability to look at something and go, 9 out of 10 businesses fail in the first 10 years. I can make it. We're wild. So you guys are very creative, right? So we have to steward it. Here's the thing. Be hard on outcomes, your vision, but loose on details. If you're so stringent on our path forward and every single thing is plotted out, this is why I'm not a personal fan of calendar blocking everything. I think some of you it works really, really well, but really hard on outcomes, what I need to get done that day, but I'm kind of loose on how it happens. In your company, same thing. Don't be so hard on like, this is how we do it. This is the process that we do it, that you will stifle your opportunity, innovation, growth, because if you just adapted it and pivoted a little bit, you would have had the same outcome with much less stress, much less cost. So be a little loose on the details and allow other people to speak up on them. So, creativity and operations. Let me give you an example here. I want you to be looking at your companies and always asking the question, is there a better way that we can do things? One of the things that we had at BAD is we have a full service department in the info side. And it's really heavy. Like, we do a lot. Our team is incredible. They're absolutely, insane humans. They're amazing at what they do. But we do a lot for clients. Everything, right? Like writing the VSL, building the webinar, doing the ads, like all of it. So it's very expensive to do that service. Very, very expensive. And so our pods look like this. You had a strategist, you had a project manager, you had a senior media buyer, you had a copywriter, you had a development person for websites, you had a graphic design, you had video, I had email. Let's see, do we have automations? Weird looking pod. That was very, 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 very expensive. We're talking over 120 grand a month in payroll. Very expensive. So our thing was like, as we're scaling, if every time we have to get a new client and we're like capped out, we have to front 120 grand a month to get one client, but we got to fill that pod and like, we're going to be negative. Like, it's very expensive, right? So even for this, our thing was like, okay, just asking the question, what if we could change and just be a little creative here? Because every pod can handle about 3 to 4 accounts if they're full service. So how can we make sure we're reducing the cost of our base pod, scaling with the minimum expectation in mind, and then we can adapt as we scale. But as we're projecting out finances and profits for the year, if we expect to scale out divisions, then man, our expenses go nuts, right? So it was like, okay, ask the question, how could we get a service done at the base level, like basic, you can't strip it down anymore, but it is at the bottom. Like, what would that pod have to look like? And for us, okay, senior strategist, we definitely needed a project manager, and then it was a media buyer, copywriter, email specialist. Depending on the needs of that client, we could serve the client with that. But we still have to have all the other things, but it's not like we need them all the time. So what we did, that's a terrible drawing to explain it. Let me try this. Let me try it one more time here. So what we did, if we say that, okay, this is the pod, we have senior strategist, project manager, senior media buyer, copywriter, and email. So we would have our multiple pods here. This would represent a district, 3 pods in a district. So this represents a district. And what we realized was, okay, those were the ones that we needed. Those were people like we could not do the job without them. But things like automations, graphic design, video editing, web development, it's not like we needed them in every pod. They were called based on projects and tasks. And so what we did instead was we stripped those people out of the pods, and we now created a support pod, these people, that would then support a district based on ticketing systems like customer service. So where now each pod could send a request down to the support pod and then get the things they needed, and we could track capacity based on the number of tickets from each division or pod that they were getting. And so that's how we could start understanding that all of a sudden, pod 1 really needs an automations person because they are constantly getting tickets and the capacity is too high. So now all of a sudden, we can put that person in pod 1, hire a new automations person for the support pod, and this is how we can grow the pods the most lean as possible, right? Just an idea of like, how do we build this thing completely different? If we didn't have any of these systems or people in place, how could we possibly build it in a better way? Super easy and simple, right? It's just being creative and asking the question. Creative and resources, these are my last couple slides, creativity and resources. 2 things to resources. First is cash. How can you get creative with cash? This is only one example, but I want to spur your thoughts of like, you have to start thinking like every aspect of the company, there's more ways to do it than I'm doing it currently. Example, how many of you want to buy a business, but you're like, I don't have the cash to buy a business? Cool. There's a lot of different ways you can do it. There's so many different ways that you can get cash or buy a business without needing it. Best things is really when there's no money out of pocket. Here's an example. I'm not a financial person. Most of you shouldn't do this strategy, but I'm saying it so that you at least know the idea of like there are things out there that do it, right? Example, when things were going bad with crypto, when we saw the banks in California go down, in my head, when I started to see that, I was like, as a founder, I need to make sure that our company has access to cash just in case things hit the fan and we go bad, right? Not good, bad, bad, bad. So it was like, okay, we need access to credit lines, do we need loans, blah, blah, blah. And I found this one company, they were called Pipe, right? They service software companies. They essentially allow software companies to get cash flow up front so they can purchase more customers, right? It's hard to acquire clients if your customers are only worth 97 bucks. Right? So what Pipe will essentially do, if I have a customer that's $100 a month, I can turn it into Pipe. Pipe essentially buys the contract and will send that company, the $100 times 12 minus like 11%, essentially. And so I reached out to the company. They didn't do this. They didn't have anything about anything else other than software companies online. But I was like, you guys work with recurring revenue businesses. Have you guys ever worked with agencies? They're like, no. I was like, hey, what do you ever think about it? Like, sure. So they reviewed our company, looked at P&Ls, and they're like, we love agencies. Why not? So what we were able to build with this company was essentially that at any time, let's say I have a client that's worth 10 grand a month, I could turn it into Pipe, and Pipe will deposit $114,000 into my account within 2 days. And essentially, I pay the 120 back over 12 months. Not a bad deal. So for me, when I was looking at acquisition, not only for other companies, the idea was very simple. It was like we could go to a company, I could deposit out of Pipe $250,000. Let's say I wanted to buy an agency for $1 million. I could go to Pipe, get $250,000 into my account, use it as the down payment. With the other agency, I would tell them I'll pay you back over the next 6 months or the next year. I could do 18 months, whatever terms I wanted to, but it didn't really matter. As soon as I acquire the company, I could put their contracts into Pipe and use their contracts to buy out their company. I pay nothing for 11% interest. It's just being creative. How many of you get more than a 1.5x ROAS on ads? Amazing. So if I could give you $100,000 today, and I said, you only have to pay me a year from now, and you have to pay me 8 grand, would you do it? Yeah. You guys want to know how you can see my ads everywhere and you just saw my face like it never stopped? Because I didn't pay for ads. I paid for ads, I got a 4x multiple, paid back Pipe, put it in again, spend more money next month. It's creativity. It's not brilliance, it's spending time thinking of what are the other ways I can be doing what I'm trying to do. It's not hard, but we got to spend time on it. And some of you just don't take that role as founder seriously. How do I protect my company at all times? How can I acquire clients for nothing? How do I not use my own cash ever, right? All these kinds of things we can be doing. Vehicles of cash. Vehicles of cash is your team. Vehicles are conduits of your company. Some of you need to put more time into recruiting. This is just a note from last night because this is where I was in the stations talking about it. It's like, what are the cool ways that you look to acquire talent? I was talking to people, it's like, well, first, I constantly am following companies that I look up to, that I think vibe similarly with our core values, and I watch them. And I go to their LinkedIn, I see everyone that works for them. The difference is some of you are reaching out to them and just being like, yo, you want to work with us? Yo, we have a job opening. Could you apply for us? No. I build a relationship. The reason we can get such great talent is because I've been nurturing for a long time. And so one of the things I'll do, I'll find the person on LinkedIn of a company I really like, and I just kind of want to nurture this thing. I'm planting seeds. And so a lot of you too, if you text me, you'll notice I send video a lot because it's different. So what I'll do is I'll just send them a video, but my phrasing is just this. Hey, my name's Ashton Shanks. You don't know me, but I'm an agency owner, and I have to say, I've been seeing your stuff online, and I remember being where you were, and I just got to say, I really respect what you're doing, and kudos to you, because honestly, no one ever did this to me when I was at your level, and so I just want to say, I see what you're doing, I see the hard work, and I really respect it. Have a great day. And I will just do that. And that's it. And what you'll get is you'll get the responses. I'll start seeing Instagram follows. They'll start following me on social media. And then all of a sudden, 3 months down the line, I'll see a message from them. Hey, I really love what you guys are doing. Can I come work with you guys? Or I'll make a post on Facebook. This is why when I make a post on Facebook about jobs, I'll get 60 applications. It's because I just spent my time networking and looking, but I'm constantly building a relationship. It's just being creative, right? Talent will build your company, so putting more time into how you do it is very, very important. Cool? Last thing. Brunello Cucciolini, if you guys go to Nordstrom, you probably see their stuff. Incredible brand, billions of dollars, but they're a cool little Italian company that makes luxury goods, essentially. But one of the things I noticed, one, great founders study other people in history. He was studying Machiavelli, and this is a quote from, as he was like reading his stuff. While at night, in the austere silence of his studio, he engaged in solitary literary conversations with the ancient scholars. Most beautiful sentence I've ever heard. All it means is he's reading. He spends his nights reading, studying. But I want you to take that line seriously of having literary conversations with ancient scholars. That's what we're doing. When you read, when you study other people, what we're doing is we are having that conversation with people who lived thousands of years ago. There is so much wisdom and insight and education that we can gain from a $30 purchase on a book. Spending that time studying is the reason we have all of this stuff here. A lot of you have made a lot of progress, and most likely somewhere along the line it came because you gleaned not from your wisdom, but the wisdom of other people, right? So spend more time studying. My final gift to you is a reading list for aspiring leaders. On this, you'll have a doc of some of my favorite books I've ever read. There's over 100 books there, categorized by leadership, biology, operations, M&A, cash flow, marketing. You'll enjoy it. But if you could do me a favor, the one thing you can grace me with is if next year you come back and you tell me which ones were your favorite, that would mean a lot to me. Thank you guys so much for being here. This is my honor, and I love this event, so thank you guys.
Ashton, you've done a lot in a short time. As you're building like these businesses, how do you allocate time for learning new skills and like time management? I know you don't time block, but like, what's the allocation? How do you dedicate that time, and how much should we be putting toward like developing ourselves?
It's just like anything else, to be honest. Like, it's just like going to the gym, right? For me, reading is going to the gym. It's just for my mind, right? And so sometimes, like I've heard this too. You know, I don't read anything right now because I think I just need to implement, right? And we get this from popular influencers who kind of tell us, and like we love to be the opposite side. People love to be polarizing, right? Some people are like, oh, we read all the time, blah, blah, blah. And then cycle goes by and people are like, oh, you shouldn't read. Like, oh, I've done everything without reading. For me, reading is the same as working out my mind. And so even if I'm in a season where I know I need to focus, I'm still reading. The difference is people who say that I'm not reading because I need to implement and I just need to focus, the hard truth is they're not doing it because they need to focus and do stuff. They're not reading because they lack the discipline to stay focused. Because when they read, they get new ideas and they have to change what they're doing, right? But if you can develop the discipline of staying focused, I personally believe you should always be reading, because I think reading is one of those things that allows you to do everything else better. So it's just making time for it. For me, it's before bed. I like to read before bed. Let me correct that. I read nonfiction in the mornings. I read fiction before I go to bed. Nonfiction, I'm not going to sleep if I do that. So.
Cool. Thanks.
Yeah.
Nice work on your transformation too. That video is.
Thank you, man.
Yeah, impressive.
Thank you.
Ashton, you mentioned that for your supporting pod, you do ticketing system. So for that, do you use Slack, or what do you use for that?
No, they do request forms that then populate into ClickUp, and then ClickUp can ping Slack, essentially.
Is it like based on who submitted the ticket first, or?
Yeah, well, not entirely, because our creative director or our copy chiefs, they have the ability to override based on priority. So normally it's priority of account.
This is great stuff, man. And I think leadership is the one skill set that we never fully get to the next level, right? We're constantly learning. I'm curious, you've been in leadership positions for a long time, through a lot of strenuous, chapters. What has been the hardest lesson for you to learn that maybe you think you've learned, and then something happens, you're like, shit, I thought I'd dealt with this already. Just curious.
I think it was less of a something I learned and something I had to decide. So a lot of you have gone through this experience. I know, I've seen it. It's painful. But like, you have consistent things where people do you wrong, right? Or like a team member that really screwed you over, or people you've really invested into, poured into, had so much trust, and they did something behind your back, or they violated that trust. That's a tough one. That's a very tough one. And over the last 2 years, I think I had that experience a lot more than I would have liked. And for me, at one point, I had to figure out and decide of I have two choices here. I can be the lion, or I can be the shepherd. I can be the lion who's a great business owner, profits, very executable, cold. Or I could be the shepherd who continually will pour into people maybe more than I should and invest more than I should and maybe have more trust than I should because I really believe in people and really want them to win, and they could punch me in the face. And I had to decide which one am I going to be. And for me, I chose to be the shepherd still. It's what I want. It's if I look back on my life and I continually got punched in the face, but I saw people win and people be empowered and grow, I would consider it worth it. But it was a very hard decision, man, because it was just, I am really getting tired of this. So yeah, that's probably more of the decision.
So I just have a question. So once you get profits, how much of that do you put back into the business and how much do you put into other investments?
Right now is interesting, right? Because we just did a merger. And so right now, pretty much all of it's going back into the business. We're very focused on what we want to do, what we want to expand. In the future, who knows? But for now, we have so many things that we want to do in the company that's what matters.
Okay, thank you.
Cool. Awesome. Thanks so much, guys.